So Hogwarts Legacy has a fair amount of decisions that you can make, but how many of them have a real impact? Surprisingly enough, quite a few of them actually, including some that will make you miss out on certain rewards if you're not being careful. I also want to issue a spoiler warning for some of the later game missions that I'll talk about towards the end of this video, so just keep that in mind before we go any further. Of course, your house of choice at the start already has one of the biggest impacts on more than just the different common rooms you have access to, which unfortunately ended up being one of the biggest letdowns in the whole game since they barely get used and have minimal content outside of a few interactions. That being said, I did cover before how each different house has one dedicated mission early on that slightly changes the way you meet the ghost during Jackdaw's Rest main story mission, with the most unique of course being the Hufflepuff one, getting a full-blown visit to Azkaban as well as a first and only look at the Dementors guarding it. Unfortunately, it did not add anything gameplay-wise. Slytherin also gets access to the giant squid hidden cave beneath the castle, which was actually one of the handful of giant squid interactions that this house has in the whole game, including the one in the Slytherin common room when tapping the third glass window. Meanwhile, Gryffindor got a not so unique look at the kitchen area, as well as a cinematic involving the ghost of Nicholas that was specific just to this house. And finally Ravenclaw, which involved visiting the Owlry in order to solve the puzzle Jackdaw left behind using his own statues. Another major decision involving the four houses comes with the two types of unique armor sets that you get for each one of them. The first one being the Relic House uniform, which you get after solving all of the 16 Daedalian key minigames found around the Hogwarts castle, which would then provide the unique house robe as a reward. Each four of these look special, look really great and high quality, displaying the obvious house theme as well as the color on the back and the entire robe, including a very nice shine effect that becomes even more noticeable during the nighttime. If you were to hunt for any armor sets, these are by far the first and the best you should in the entire game. But there's one more set of gear that's also house specific, and that's the Quidditch Captain uniform that you get from the challenge that requires you to land on all of these platforms around the open world. Of course, my favorite piece here is the last one, which is a cape that also features an upper chest guard that will change in color depending which house you represent. So for example, Gryffindor will feature the red color for the same armor, while the Slytherin comes with the green color instead. Meanwhile, Ravenclaw is an obvious blue, and lastly we have Hufflepuff with the yellow variant. Now the next big decision early on comes during the 6th major story mission called Welcome to Hogsmeade, during which Professor Weasley will ask you to choose between Natty or Sebastian to bring with you on your first journey in town. For the most part, this decision is mostly going to affect only the current mission, as it only changes which of the two characters will accompany you on the way there and won't have any bearing on future events. Even the mission structure remains unchanged, with the same events triggering at the same time, the same meeting with Mr. Moon on the outskirts of the town, with the visit, the various shops, and finally the troll fight. However, during the mission there are a few key differences between having one or the other companion. First, each will reveal more about their own lives, including Sebastian telling you about his sick sister and Natty talking about her family problems, which means you'll get to already be familiar with their backgrounds before having their special side missions. The second thing is the type of spells and the kind of like combat that they fit when you fight with the troll. Natty plays a more support kind of style, but also uses Bombarda and sometimes Expelliarmus for some reason on the troll enemy. Meanwhile, Sebastian can be seen casting Confringo and occasionally Levioso, which just proves to be useless against this enemy type. None of the dialogues otherwise matter here besides role-playing reasons, and the final cinematic before meeting Rookwood will feature either of the two companions, depending which one you chose to get in this with you. Now, some of the side content and especially open world stuff might also have some of its own consequences, albeit some of them quite bare bones. For example, in the case of the singer NPC, which appears in Hogsmeade and other hamlets, you can decide to give them some of your spare change, which will affect the number of instruments that they will afford to buy in the future. It only starts playing with the trumpet, I guess, but then progressively adds new instruments in the mix that you can see being spawned as you give him more and more money. I guess this is a nice touch over there, and I was able to get him up to a maximum of 5 instruments, so I'm not sure if there's any more than that. But I also tested the limitations of the interactions, be it good or evil, during some of the side quests. For example, during Zenobia's quest to bring back her gobstones, you can choose to either give them back to her or keep them for yourself. When giving them back, the game makes you believe this is a real consequence, as following her reveals she will indeed go to the main courtyard and even start playing with the gobstones right in front of you. I did test the limits of this, and disappointingly enough, she does the exact same thing with the evil consequence as well. You can even see the gobstone still in your inventory while she pulls out 6 more that she plays with as if she never needed you in the first place, so I guess that's just the limitation. Other similar ones exist with most other side quests around the castle that let you hold onto items from NPCs, like for example in the case of the Venomous Valor, where it doesn't matter if you choose to help Duncan Hobhouse or not, he still ends up being in the same area in the castle in both situations. At the end of it, he just is slightly pissed at you because you did not help him. Strangely enough, this leaves some of these items in your inventory, but there doesn't seem to be any actual gameplay purpose for them. Even in the room of requirement, it would have been nice maybe to be capable of using them as props or decorations in one way or another. However, missions that do let you negotiate or request a higher price for your troubles should always be picked if you want to maximize your rewards, even if those characters might be temporarily mad at you. For example, in the quest for the Lost Astrolabe, you can choose to ask for an extra compensation, which will provide you with some extra money early on top of the usual reward. Others later on, such as the delivery quest for Mr. Pippin, can give you even more money than that, almost doubling your galleon reward, in this case from 300 all the way to 500 with no real gameplay repercussions. But probably the most significant consequences will happen during Sebastian's In the Shadow chain of side missions, which don't just affect the learning of the unforgivable curses, but also what happens to him in the final quest. For example, the unforgivable curses can still be learned even after initially declining the options during its respective quest, but only as long as you do it before the entire quest chain is done, or if you did not decide to send Sebastian away during the final mission. Until the very last interaction in the very last mission, the only big decisions you'll take during these moments are to learn or not the unforgivable curses, which will only affect if you have access or not to using them. Having access to these will not have any bearing on the main story nor how other characters perceive you. Your friendship and even dialogues with both Sebastian and Ominis will not have any long-term effects either, no matter if you choose to cast them on them or not, or to learn them or not. The only one that might have a slight momentary effect is during In the Shadow of Discovery final confrontation with Ominis, as you're about to leave with the relic. Depending who you side with and depending if you previously accepted to learn Imperio or not, can have slightly different outcomes. For example, if you chose to learn the spell, you can go with the second option, which will suggest Ominis that you can cast Imperio on him, which will make him get out of the way so you can leave the catacomb. But you can reach the exact same outcome even if you did not previously decide to learn Imperio but opted for the dialogue that suggests using it on Ominis to save his friendship with Sebastian. The only change here is that now the game gives you a second chance to learn the spell once declining it the first time during the same mission. And of course, there's also the non-invasive first option, which eventually convinces Ominis, without ever having to cast Imperio on him, that escaping with the relic is for the higher good, which he reluctantly agrees to, but the end of the mission is pretty much the exact same. But the biggest decisions come during the quest called In the Shadow of Fate towards the end, which immediately starts with two options that will completely alter the post-ending interaction that you have with Ominis and Sebastian. So by picking the option to not turn in Sebastian, this is the only way in which you can ensure that you will remain friends with him and he continues to stay as a student at Hogwarts. This is also the only way in which the game lets you access the unforgivable curses once more, assuming that you previously decided to refuse learning them, by simply talking with him after the post-story mission is done, heading over in the Undercroft where you can ask him to teach them to you once more. Meanwhile, if you go with the option to turn him in, this will be considered the bad ending for him, resulting in immediately terminating your friendship with Sebastian, which is also sent to Azkaban upon contacting the Ministry of Magic. As a result, he will no longer be present at the school, nor can he be accessed for the unforgivable curses, completely locking you out if you chose not to learn them. But before moving on with the main story possible endings, there's one smaller decision that you can make along the way involving this cutscene during the Sand Baker's trial, where you have to tame the Grabhorn and get it as a mount. So if you choose the option upon defeating it to kneel, this will make your character put the wand down, which results in a more friendly interaction with the creature once its charge is over. However, the attack option will instead subdue the creature by doing one final attack, showing dominance, from which gameplay-wise will have the exact same effect. This choice is purely for role-playing reasons, it's just that the cutscene that plays slightly different. And finally, this brings us to the main story options. As I've said, big spoiler warning, so if you didn't reach that point yet, just save this video for later. But as I've said, there's two possible outcomes, a good or an evil ending. Luckily, there's only one final dialogue that will affect which one of these endings you get when talking with Professor Fig right before the fight against Ranrock in the mission called the Final Repository. So when questioned about what you intend to do with the forgotten magic, if you choose I intend to keep it contained here, this will ensure that you get the good ending no matter which of the following dialogue options you get after this. This will also change the final cutscene that you have. In this case, you get help from Professor Fig in your attempt to contain the power upon defeating Ranrock. As a result, this will unfortunately not go well for him, to say the least, which ends up with this scene giving him back his wife's wand. On the other hand, you can get with the evil ending by choosing the second option, I intend to open it. Whichever of the two options you pick, with the exception of the one you're right, will both end up with Fig quite literally getting offed in a split second right in front of you after that dialogue was picked. Of course, with the two final scenes also lacking the post-fight interaction with him, as he's now pretty much gone and his body can no longer be found. Also noteworthy that your evil self for some reason seems to be more capable of containing all that power alone, though this will not provide anything special gameplay-wise after the post-story credits. And this pretty much concludes all of the biggest or most important decisions and their consequences that you can take in Hogwarts Legacy. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.